learn how to listen to yourself. I know it's a little ironic that I'm telling you to stop following other people's advice, yet here I am about to give you some advice. But I think it's a little different because this is really something I wish someone had told me at the beginning of the year to kind of stop doing. Stop looking to other people or asking for advice or seeking for online advice on basically how to live my life, because doing this or looking to other people for advice messes you up. So just to give you a little bit of context, a few days ago I was doing some journaling and I was reflecting on how I got here. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm living a pretty good life. I'm in a very good place physically, mentally, and spiritually. In general, I feel pretty content and I feel like I'm no longer chasing something. I feel that anything that I do at this point in my life is just kind of a cherry on top, and I no longer think or believe that anything that I get at this point in my life is going to be really magical. Anyways, in short, I feel pretty content. I mean, I still have goals and all that, as we all do, but again, in general, I feel pretty content. As I was thinking about this, I really asked myself, how did I really get here? How did I come up to this point? And the answer that I came up with was actually, I'm really good at listening to myself. But whenever I listened to other people's advice, I became confused. Whenever I followed other people's advice, I stopped being me, or I start becoming not myself. So if you're feeling lost and you don't know how you got to the place where you are right now, I have a feeling that it's because you haven't really cultivated the skills of listening to yourself. You have basically followed other people's advice and you don't know how to listen to yourself. So in this video, this is what I really want to talk about. I want to share why listening to other people's advice is a terrible idea and how to cultivate the skills of listening to your beautiful self. In general, I have a pretty rebellious attitude. If you tell me that I can't do something, and the very next day, I am trying my best to prove you wrong and doing that exact thing that you told me I couldn't do. I remember when I was a new grad nurse and I was working in a medical surgical floor. And if you know nothing about nursing, medical surgical floor gets a bad rep for being the job that you're supposed to start when you're a new nurse. And 6 months into the job, I felt pretty bored and I didn't like it anymore. It felt so routine and I'm always looking for a challenge. I decided that I wanted to become an emergency nurse, but a lot of senior nurses would tell you that you cannot go into emergency with 6 months of experience or even a year of experience. You need to be having 1 or 2 experiences before you become an emergency nurse. And that kind of makes sense because you don't want to go into something super acute or take care of really sick people without getting your foundations right. But knowing me, I knew that I wasn't going to stay another 6 months or even a year into a job just because other people told me that I couldn't do something. So by 8 months into nursing, I was an emergency nurse. And that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. And then there was a time where I didn't listen to myself and instead I listened to other people's advice online. Like, hey, you should quit your job and become an online entrepreneur, or you should quit your job and become a freelance writer or become a digital nomad, which by the way, I actually have tried all of it. I did that. I quit my nursing job and did all these things. But the problem was that I thought it was the worst decision ever. I didn't love it because it didn't feel like me. I basically turned my passion of writing into a job, and that was essentially the worst decision ever. I just didn't like it. So I had to course correct that decision, and that's where basically I became a travel nurse. And now I still do nursing, and I get to keep writing as my hobby and as my passion, and life is good again. So that experience of quitting my job is really where I truly learned the expensive mistake of listening to other people's advice. Because here's the problem. Most people's advice is biased, but sometimes the viewer, you and I, or the person who's watching the other person giving advice, or the reader, forget that the person on the other side is biased towards his or her own experience. They don't know who you are. They don't know who I am. They only know their experiences and circumstances and their own perceptions. They don't know what are our circumstances, what resources we have, and in general, they just have no idea what's going on with our lives when it comes to giving advice. So if someone is telling you to quit your job because it's worked for them, it might not necessarily work for you too. I don't care if they say that this is the best decision that they have made in their entire life, but it might be the worst decision for you. Another example when it comes to content creation about following other people's advice. So if you're a content creator, you've probably heard of the following. You have to niche down, pick one topic, but then then there will be other contradictory advice out there that will tell you, oh, you should be authentic, or do this one thing, do this other format that is working. And the problem with this is that, again, some of these topics or advices are quite contradictory to each other. For example, how can I be myself but also niche down if inherently I'm quite interested in multiple different things? If I like to live my life in a fulfilling way where I get to experience as many things as possible, how can I be authentic and also niche down? So do you see where I'm going with this? Sometimes it's actually more harmful to listen to other people's advice, especially if you don't have confidence in yourself in the first place. So now that you know why listening to other people's advice is a terrible idea, let's get into the good part, which is learning how to listen to yourself. I do not mean to sound like a broken record, but in case you don't watch all of my videos, I need to say this because it's very important. Get to know yourself. This can be on a superficial level, like how you dress up, what food do you like, how do you like to take your coffee, but also on a deeper level. What brings you joy? What lights you up? What are the things that energizes you? What drains you? Who do you love spending time with the most and why? These are the questions that you can start with when it comes to getting to know yourself. When you know what lights you up and what basically moves you, or just knowing yourself, you can basically learn how to think for yourself. Let's say, for example, that someone is giving you an advice on how to invest. There are so many ways to go about investing. One way is that you can learn how to pick stocks individually and put money in them and then watch your money grow over time. The other way is to kind of do it passively, which is what I'm doing, where you just kind of put money into an ETF or an index fund and kind of let the compounding effect do its magic. Different people are going to be biased towards one strategy over the other, but when you know yourself, you can make an informed decision. So if you're someone like me who's super lazy when it comes to investing, again, I just want to take advantage of the power or magic of the compounding effect. I don't necessarily want to watch the stock market every single day and figure out where to put my money and all that. I just don't have the capacity or the time and energy and space to do any of that. But who's to say that my strategy is the right way? Whereas if you're someone who has plenty of time, maybe you're young and you're in your teenage years and really learning or watching the stock market really closely, and you really want to get into this whole thing, and you might have time to analyze and figure out where other people should put their money. And there is no right or wrong answer, but the point of getting to know yourself is that you can make an informed decision. So you can see other people for their advice, or you can get all this information but not necessarily act on them just because a person is talking passionately about that advice or that topic. And this is really how you can learn how to listen to yourself, is that by simply getting to know yourself, you are able to filter out different advice and information out there so that you can make decisions that you feel good about. Values as guiding decisions. Once you know yourself a little bit better, you can start developing your values. Your values are basically your internal guiding compass or your internal compass, and you can use them as your decision framework or a way to guide your decisions. For example, some of my values include freedom, flexibility, growth, excitement, curiosity. And these aren't words that I just picked up from Google, and these are words that are actually really important to me. I kind of dissected everything that's important to me by looking at what had happened in my life and what actions I made, and then kind of seeing what resonates with me and basically figuring out what's important to me. That's basically what your values are. What are the things that are important to you? So for example, when I was debating when quitting my job, one of the things that I listed out in my pros and cons list is the fact that I didn't like the feeling of being disrespected in the healthcare system. I was getting almost bullied by the healthcare system, by the family, my colleagues, the doctors, the people that I work with. And anytime I get into a situation where I feel disrespected, I get triggered and I get really upset. From this, I know that being respected or respect is something that I truly, truly value. I believe that if you respect me, and then I'll respect you. I don't like it when people are late because I feel that my time isn't respected, so I get really triggered by that. It might not necessarily be true, but that's something that I've noticed about myself. So that's one way to figure out your values, is that kind of looking at the things that are triggering for you, what upsets you, what frustrates you, and also just the things that you're proud of in life and things that you're excited about. Another thing when it comes to values is learning how to clearly define these values. So for example, freedom is one of my value, and freedom to me means kind of being flexible in my work, and that means I can go anywhere I want, wherever I want, for however long I want. But for you, maybe freedom means that you still get to keep your job. Maybe you're just somewhere remote and you still have your 9 to 5, but you are anywhere in the world. So freedom can mean differently to a lot of people, but it's very important that you define your own meaning of freedom. But having values, I think, is one of the things that I didn't really appreciate before, but now I actually use them as my guiding compass, like I've said. So for example, whenever I'm presented with a new opportunity, whatever it is, maybe it's a job, and it basically has to go through the lens of my values. I have to ask myself, does this job meet the value of my freedom? Does this mean that I can take time off, or that I can go anywhere I want for however long I want? If it doesn't, then I'm sorry, but this opportunity has to go. And same thing when it comes to maybe excitement. Does this job or new opportunity make me feel excited, or does it help me grow as a person? And if it answers yes to these questions, then of course I will go with the opportunity or with the job, whatever it is. Growing as a person is very important to me. If I'm not growing in the job or in this thing that I'm doing, then I feel stagnant and I feel that I'm not living my life to the fullest. So I always have to keep growing. And that's where the values really come in handy when it comes to guiding decisions in your life. I feel that when you take actions from the perspective or from the lens of your values, you actually make good decisions, or maybe they might be the wrong decisions, but at least you won't regret about them, or you'll actually feel good when you actually make these decisions, because it's almost like I've thought about what's important to me and I'm making decision based on that. And isn't that such a good place to make decisions from? The third tip that I have for you when it comes to learning how to listen to yourself is to take action and evaluate. So in nursing, there's this thing called the nursing process, and the steps are assessment, diagnosis, planning, implementation, and then evaluation. Just to go through an example when it comes to this, because I feel like it's really important, because we don't evaluate our actions enough. For example, let's say in a hospital and I'm taking care of someone and they have to go for a walk because they need to go home and they need to walk. And let's say they can't because they're in pain. So my assessment would be, patient has a very limited mobility due to pain. That would be kind of my assessment / diagnosis. And then I'll plan something. Maybe I'll say, hey, maybe this patient needs some medication 30 minutes before they go on their physiotherapy exercise, whatever it is. So that's my plan. And then my implementation would be something along the lines of give medications 30 minutes before they go on their physiotherapy. But then I don't just stop there. I don't just say, hey, okay, now I'm going to give this medication and then it'll stop. I actually have to give the medication, of course, and then I have to go back to the patient and ask them, hey, are you feeling better? Did the pain medication work? Can you actually go for the walk now, and so that you can go home? So me going back to see if the patient can walk now, or if the pain medication has worked after I've given it, it's called evaluating. I'm evaluating if the thing that I did actually worked. So in the real world, this is exactly what you need to do. You need to take action and then evaluate to see if this thing that you did worked. So once you start listening to yourself and once you start taking action because you have gathered the courage or confidence to take that action, now it's time to see whether that thing that you did worked. Or if not, then maybe you need to change your strategy. So in the same example that I did, if the pain medication didn't work, what I could do is maybe I can increase the dosing of the medication that I gave, or maybe I can change it into a different type of pain medication because this specific one is not working. I'm not just going to go to the doc and be like, hey, this thing that I did didn't work. What should I do now? So what you're essentially trying to do is figuring out the things that you're doing, if they're working, and kind of trying out different things to see if it will give you different results. When the thing that you're doing is not working, it doesn't mean that you suck and that you need to necessarily go out there and ask for other people's advice. All you have to do is kind of sit down and see where it worked and why it didn't work. Maybe it's your mindset that's the problem, not really your strategy, because to me that happens a lot. I go into this rabbit hole of looking up other people's opinions or looking up online what I could do differently to see whether maybe that's the reason I'm not growing or I'm not getting the results I want. But a lot of times it's honestly just the way I see myself, the way I perceive myself, and the way that I'm showing up because I'm not aligned or energetically aligned to the things that I'm doing is the problem. It's not necessarily that my strategy sucks. Maybe actually a lot of the times it's just because I don't feel good about the thing I'm doing. And if I don't feel good, I'm not going to show up good. And that leads to a whole self-sabotage thing, which we're not going to talk about today. So what you have to do is to learn how to take action by listening to yourself and then evaluate. Keep listening to yourself, but also at the same time, take note of what's working and then change from that, but still by listening to yourself. The next thing that you need to do is to become really good at ignoring others. This is really hard considering the amount of things we see on social media, and I'm not immune to this. As I've told you, I've listened to other people's advice and I've suffered expensive mistakes. You have to learn how to ignore others because the truth is the answers are within you. I don't have the answers to your questions. I don't know who you are. I don't know you. I don't know what your circumstances are. I don't know what resources you have. So I don't know the answers to your questions. What I do know is that you have the answers within you. You know yourself better than anybody, and you're the only one who can figure out the answers that you want. I think what's happening is that maybe you don't have the courage to act on whatever it is that you want to do. And I think it's a shame because I really think that we have our own little gifts to kind of share in the world. Otherwise, we wouldn't want them, or we wouldn't have this nagging feeling or urge to kind of do it. And it's a real shame. And also when it comes to ignoring other people's content, I feel that this raises the question of, does this mean that you should not consume other people's content? The answer is no, absolutely not. I'm a creator. I have to consume content. I have to know what's out there. But because now I have built a foundation of learning to trust myself, to listening to myself, I can kind of filter out the things that I like and don't like. If I hear some sort of advice, I can tell myself, this works for me, this doesn't work for me, and then kind of repeat that over and over again whenever I'm consuming, because there's a lot of things online that will tell you, do this, buy this, and they're so passionate about this thing that you just want to do it. But the problem is, do you really need to do it? Do you need to do that thing that they're telling you? I have a feeling no. I want you to get to the point where you trust yourself enough, that you trust your skills, your capabilities, that you are enough, that you have everything you need to succeed in this world, and that you are excited by the thing that you're doing in your day-to-day life. The truth is, when you follow other people's advice, you'll always feel behind. You always feel like you're just following someone else's. But when you listen to yourself, you learn how to carve your own pathway, and you start to create and maybe embrace your own little corner, or not little, but corner or space in this world. Anyways, these are all the things that I wish someone had told me when it comes to my whole content creation and self-discovery journey, is that to listen to your own self. I hope that this video resonated with you, that you be kind to yourself and you take it one day at a time. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.